Well, hello there, and today we are doing another tier list video, and this time we are rating all the countries in Africa on GeoGuessr based on the regional difficulty. And if you enjoy this video, smash the like button and subscribe, and let's jump straight into this. Okay, so in the previous video I had a few comments asking about certain countries that why weren't they included in the Asia tier list, and the reason why is because they don't have Google Street View. So with these tier lists I don't include countries that have unofficial coverage. I'll only include ones that have official Google Street View, whether that is only Trekker or it is on the actual main roads itself. So if the country is not mentioned in this video, it either means that it is in the yogurt and Rice Krispies section, or you're thinking of a country that is not really on the right continent. And we can begin on the easiest countries, the fish and chips. And the very first one is Rwanda, and this was by far the easiest country for me when I get it on GeoGuessr for the continent, mostly because of firstly its country size. So it's a very small country, about the size of Belgium, which is very small for the African continent. And you've also got the lack of coverage, and the coverage is also only found in the main city, or the capital in fact. So that combination of the two is very helpful, and for country identification with the Gen 4 you don't really get the black vehicle anywhere else in Africa. So like the Senegal, the Nigeria and the Kenya should not have that. So Rwanda has to be the easiest country based on those reasons. The second country that I have included in fish and chips is Uganda. If it did not have national parks, it'll probably be on par, if not easier than Rwanda itself. The country is also very identifiable just based off the Google car, but there are other clues that can help narrow down Uganda, and you can also get familiar with the two different main areas, which is like Kampala and Entebbe. And in terms of region guessing, I guess it's kind of harder because there's always that risk, but because the actual two main cities are kind of right next to each other, it doesn't really make too much difference with the scoring. Okay, so now let's move on to It'll Do, Jeff. And the first country that is on here is Egypt. So Egypt, mostly Trekker of course, and of course tourist sites. So very identifiable, and I know some of the actual trekkers, and you're not really going to get the country wrong unless you get some really obscure location. But to be honest, it should be pretty straightforward to get. Eswatini is the next one. You can muddle it up sometimes with South Africa, but it's quite rare. But also, if you're outside the main city, you can get it a lot throughout the main roads throughout Eswatini. So it can be quite hard to pinpoint, but for me, I'm not really great with pinpointing. So to be honest, that's why Eswatini is in this green category. If I was really good with pinpointing, maybe it would be in the fish and chips category. The next country I put is actually Madagascar, and this might surprise a few, but Madagascar is quite a big island, but it has a very lack of coverage. I know quite a lot of the Madagascar trekker locations. I don't remember them all, so it's not perfect. If I did, then obviously it'd be fish and chips, because if I know all the locations, then it's going to be really easy. The next country I put is Tunisia. The country is very identifiable, especially with like the follow car. So there's quite a few and a good amount of regional guessing clues for Tunisia. It's a bigger country than people think it is, but at the same time, it's also got quite a lot of good region clues that I'm aware of. So I have to put it in It'll Do, Jeff. And the next country is Idrissa Gana Gay, which is Ghana. And the reason why I put Ghana in It'll Do, Jeff, is I'm familiar with quite a few of the national park vehicles. It's a bit rusty, but I know some. You can actually work out the region, especially the far north of Ghana. Ghana is quite distinctive to the rest of it. Of course, if you're on the coastline, you probably see mostly palm trees and stuff like that. And there's quite a lot of few methods I can use to separate different regions in Ghana. However, it is harder than the other ones on this list, most because like Cape Coast, Accra can be quite difficult to separate. There's also some other ones that can be quite difficult too, further up in the country. But it has to be in It'll Do, Jeff. The final country I put in It'll Do, Jeff, is Lesotho. And Lesotho is a similar story to Eswatini, but the main difference is I feel like it's harder to, like, for me at least, to region guess, mostly because I'm not really familiar with certain parts of the country being different to others. Like if it's in the urban areas, it's probably easier than Eswatini. I feel like Masura is the main area for Lesotho, and anywhere else it's not really as urbanly dense. You can get some that kind of near, but you're still near enough right. But if I was going with like pinpointing using the compass quite well, then probably Lesotho and Eswatini would be higher. And also I feel like Lesotho you can get wrong with South Africa as well, so that's also another thing to consider, especially towards the border kind of areas. Okay, so now moving on to No Thanks Chief. Tanzania will be the first one, but there is a big but here. I don't really know Tanzania coverage that well, because in Tanzania it is really restricted, and to be be honest, I can picture a few in my head, but I haven't probably studied it enough to make a good kind of valid point. But it's a big country, but that big country kind of aspect doesn't really count. If I knew the trekkers quite well, it'll be the easiest country here. But in terms of like pinpointing, getting 5Ks, it's probably the hardest country here because it's a trekker and it's difficult. So I feel with Tanzania, based on the lack of knowledge I have, and it's not really something I've looked into in terms of how will I play on it, I have to put it in, I don't know, Jeff. Anyways, let's move on to the next one, which is good old Botswana. Botswana is quite an interesting one. It's a fairly big country for Africa, and to be honest, it's one of those where you can find some regional patterns, especially towards like the more hilly parts near Gaborone, or the more sandy parts towards the north, or the west, in fact, and then you've got the more like kind of like savanna and open grassland towards the far north. But it is very hard to pinpoint. If I was very good with compass again, it would probably be an easier country because there's not really that many main roads to plonk on. But I'm still going to put it in no thanks, Chief, because also you can muddle it up with South Africa sometimes, or I can at least. And there's been very rare cases of me muddling it up with Eswatini, which is quite a weird thing, but it does happen. So I have to put Botswana in no thanks, Chief. I feel like the other countries above are easier to do better in. Anyways, let's move on to Kenya. And this is the first country, I believe, to have new Generation 4 coverage. Of course, excluding Rwanda, because obviously that got Gen 4 straight away. But the three countries is Kenya, Senegal, and Nigeria. And in this video, I'm kind of combining the factor of the Gen 4 and the Gen 3 kind of metas that I know. And I feel like it's more important to be aware of the Gen 4 because that'll cover more of the country in the future. Also, there's a lot more variation with a few aspects, including more areas of Street View and also different variations in Google Cars. This one's quite an interesting one because I know some reasonable metas from the new coverage, like Lodwar, I think it's called, the one that's really far northwest. Feel free to correct me in the comments if I've muddled that up. But that kind of area is kind of quite distinctive. You've still got the palm trees towards the coast around Mombasa, Malindi. Nairobi is a good hedge. You can also use some metas I'm kind of familiar with, especially towards the west. I'm much better at working out whether it's more west of Nairobi or near Nairobi. I'm not very good anywhere else in Kenya, especially with the new coverage, but I haven't really studied the new camera generation that much and how it varies with the vehicles, but it has to be bang in the middle, and it's probably the easiest out of the three for me with the new Gen 4. And the final one is another one that has had new Gen 4 added, and that is Senegal. And with Senegal, it's, for me, I find it one of the most hardest countries to region guess in if you exclude the fact of size. But there's some areas like Tambacounda when it's very grassy, it's kind of identifiable. You've also got the capital, Dakar, or Fez, whether it's called, or Fez, I do not know, Jeff, but there's quite a few areas like St. Louis, they can be quite identifiable. But other than that, it's very difficult. I've been baited very often with the reddish soil. You've also got a lot more new coverage in Senegal now that I haven't really covered, so it's kind of unfair for me to assume that I'll be fine with those areas, but like the areas around Gambia, I tend to get them right by practice, but it does not mean I am confident with it. So I have to put Senegal with Kenya here and Botswana in no thanks, Chief. Okay, so now we're moving on to if, buts, and maybes, but not quite absolutes. And the very first country is the final one with the new Gen 4, and it is Nigeria. Very similar story with Senegal and Kenya, but the thing that's kind of worrying with Nigeria is the amount of brand new meta available to either research or to learn. And I feel like the gap has got that big now. It is going to be much more difficult to get better at Nigeria compared to like Senegal and Kenya. So Nigeria has to be a rank below for sure. It's also a fairly big country, and if it was Gen 3, I would probably put it on level with them, but the Gen 4 has just been an absolute nightmare, especially with the follow car stuff. It's kind of just gone mental. There's some new areas of coverage in Nigeria. There's a lot of new coverage actually in Nigeria that I haven't really studied or learned, so I'm kind of getting good at Port Harcourt, but other than that, it's still a work in progress and has to be one of the harder countries in Africa for GeoGuessr. And the next one I have put on the same category is South Africa, and this might surprise a few because country identification wise, South Africa is quite good, and there are a lot of region clues for South Africa to separate like Cape from like Pretoria, or the KwaZulu-Natal from like Limpopo. There's quite a few clues that you can use to separate them. Also, someone keeps saying, so I think someone commented before that meta doesn't include signs and stuff. When I say meta, I don't. It's just the tip of my tongue. I know I mean like tips for the country. It's just a way of me shortening it for tips. So when you hear me say meta, I may not necessarily mean the vehicles all the time. I might just actually just be saying I need to learn that these tips. But back to South Africa, there's quite a lot of variation, but there's new Gen 4 coverage and it can confuse the heck out of me sometimes. Like I can find really green parts near Northern Cape. It's something to consider, and also South Africa is a big country. And I think when I was checking, South Africa is the second biggest one on this list. And like I say, it should not be underestimated. There are some rounds that are quite easy, like Joburg, good round, Cape Town, good round. But it's those places in between, like Free State can be a problem, I reckon, if you can't work out it's Free State, or Northwest as well as an underrated kind of province as well. So there's quite a lot of things that come into play here, and I feel like there's more information being found out with South Africa as we speak. My thoughts are that it has to be in if buts and maybes. In probably along par with Nigeria, mostly because the new coverage that's come out and the new findings that's come out, I haven't kept in touch with, so it has to be under if buts and maybes. And that leaves us with our very last country that might surprise a few in this video, because quite a few of you guys who maybe are just getting into GeoGuessr will not know this country actually has official Street View, but it does. But it is on a tripod, so it's a Trekker kind of meta, and it's not really introduced onto most of the popular gold maps. But I'm including it here, and it is Mali. And as you can tell from the stats, it is pretty damn high, and it's a very high score. And it's a pretty big country as well. And you can tell me, can you name 5 places as Street View coverage in Mali? And I just will have no idea, because I just haven't studied it. And I feel like it's a fair thing to put it in raw quiche and a rice cake because of that reason. But yeah, this is my tier list for all the African countries. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Feel free to share what your tier list is and whether you would change some of this or whether you keep it the same. The next one will be the Americas, and I will see you next time. Yeah, of course.